If we've taken time to work with some of the basic customization options, and even to change the fields of information that we can see on our forms by using the additional options, and we're still not quite happy with what we see, then we can go in and work with something known as the Layout Designer. The Layout Designer can be accessed from many different things, including the forms themselves. But if we're already working with basic customizations, there's also a button at the bottom of the dialog window. We'll simply give the Layout Designer a click or a tap. If we've ever worked with any kind of form design tool, like Access Forms or InfoPath or any variety of other tools, then this is going to be very familiar to us. If we haven't, then it might be a little bit intimidating, but it's okay because we can always kind of play with things, and if we don't like it, we can always close out without saving the changes. This is also why we make a copy of templates before we go in and work with the design, in case we ever do something that we didn't intend to do and want to just put it back the way that it was. We must realize that everything on the page in this particular tool is an item. In other words, we have our logo on the top left, we have our company information, including our address and the company name, and even on the upper right-hand side, we have the title of the form itself. As we click on each of these, we can see that it gets a border around it and something called sizing handles. With sizing handles, we can move over any one of them, get the double-headed arrow, and click and drag to resize. This is important if we're trying to make room on a form. Since this is an invoice, the title does not need to be nearly as long as it is, so we can simply shrink that down and then maybe have room for some other information at the top of the form. Unlike the basic customization, which simply allowed us to add a logo or an image, we can now move and resize the image. So if we wanted this to be on the other side, we could select it, move over the border, and press and hold our mouse, and simply drag it where we wanted it to go. Another little trick is the ability to select multiple items at one time. If we click and drag and basically form a square around multiple items, it will select all of those items. Now we have to be careful that we don't accidentally select other items that we didn't want. We can then click to deselect items. Another option is to click on a field or an item, and then hold the Shift key while we click on additional items to make a multiple selection. So if we now wanted to move these over to the left, we could drag them with our mouse, but if we want to move them directly to the left in a straight line, using the arrow keys is a much better option. We'll go ahead and tap that left arrow key until it lines up the way that we want. And then, of course, if we wanted to move and size our hammer, we could do that as well. We do have to be very careful if we work with fields that are on the bottom of this particular form because they're really arranged in a tabular mode where everything lines up nicely. It's important that they stay lined up nicely, or it's just going to look askew when we look at it on screen or print it out. Now, don't forget that we also have an entire toolbar up here. We can work with the properties of any selected item. We can add additional items like text boxes, different data fields from QuickBooks, or even another image. We can select items and we can copy them. We can also remove them. Or once we get something formatted the way we want, we can copy the format. A really useful tool is if we have two or more items selected, we can make them the same height, the same width, or the same size, which would be both the width and the height. We can also choose to align things center horizontally, meaning left to right across the screen. And the good news is, if we do something bad, we can always click Undo. If it gets hard to work with items because they're a little small on your screen, don't miss the fact that on the right-hand side of the screen, we do have the capability to zoom in and to zoom out. Really, the options here are almost endless. But let's go ahead and select the name of our company on the top left of our invoice. If we're not sure where information is coming from, when something is selected, we can move to the bottom left and it will tell us. In this case, it is a data field based on the company name entry. With this selected, we can click or tap Properties on the upper left of the window. Here, we can work with both the text, meaning its alignment, the border, if we want to have any or none at all, and kind of a nice feature is we can even work with rounded corners and change the colors. We can also choose to put a background. Let's move back to text and leave all of the alignment the way it is, but let's click or tap the font button. As we would expect, we're presented with both a font choice, as well as whether we want it to be regular, italic, or bold. We can also do bold and italic. And we can even make it larger. And I think our company name needs to be bolded and larger so people know absolutely where this invoice came from. We can click or tap OK one more time, and we can see that our change has been made. But of course, it's now too big to fit into our field. So we're going to use those sizing handles one more time to stretch it out and make sure that it fits appropriately. This is why customizing some forms can take a long time. It's what we call front end heavy. There's a large investment in how much time it may take to get something to look the way that we want, but when it's done, we never have to do it again, and it really is usually time well invested. Since some of our forms may be printed, don't forget to at least take a look at the margin settings that are available from the bottom left side of the screen. Here we can work with the grid and snap settings, which has to do with the design environment. Just so we can see the difference, let's go ahead and turn off Show Grid, and we'll leave Snap to Grid on, which means that items as we're dragging them snap so they align more easily. We'll go ahead and say OK, and you'll see that we get a much cleaner view, almost like a print preview. It certainly looks nice, but it's not nearly as easy to align items when we don't have the grid. So generally, I recommend that we keep the grid turned on. Lastly, at the bottom is a checkbox that says Show the Envelope window. And you'll wonder why we're even talking about an envelope window when this is an invoice. Well, it's because many businesses use window envelopes to put their invoices in so that we don't have to print labels. This is just a toggle that basically shows where the window appears, so we can make sure that in this company, all of our information regarding both our company or the return address, as well as our customer information, falls within the appropriate spaces. If it's not, then we can go ahead and move them so that they do. Of course, if we don't use window envelopes, then this is not an issue, and we would probably go ahead and turn this off. When we're done having fun, because honestly, designing forms can be a lot of fun and be very rewarding, we click or tap OK on the bottom right. Depending on how we got into the Layout Designer, we will probably be brought back to the basic customization window, at which point we can click OK to dismiss that window as well. The last thing I recommend, regardless of whether we just do basic, additional, or the custom layout designer, is to always make sure that our invoices are named appropriately. We expect to see a rename option from the templates menu, or possibly if we right-click on a particular item in a list, but we don't see it there. It's not really intuitive, and I actually wish that it was available, but what we're going to do is go ahead and choose to edit the template, and then display the Manage Templates window. Here, when we have the template selected on the left, we also see the template name on the right, and this on the right is editable. We should always give our templates useful descriptive names. For example, invoice without sales tax, especially if there's a special purpose for it. Once the naming is done, we'll go ahead and click OK. We'll click OK again, and we can close out our list. And of course, the final last hurrah is to open an invoice and to select the template from the top of the screen where we have a drop-down that designates the template. This is how we can use different templates for different purposes or different customers and even different transactions. If we're concerned that our screen doesn't completely look like what we were just working with, have no fear. That's because we're viewing it on screen. With the Layout Designer, we need to actually go into Print and Print Preview, and now we can see all of the changes that we just implemented. We'll go ahead and close that down, close out of this invoice without saving it, take a deep breath, and sit back and relax for just a minute. Using the Layout Designer can take a little bit of practice and a little bit of time, but it is the one tool that QuickBooks provides that truly allows us to customize how our business forms look and behave. And if that's important to us in our business, then it is time well invested.